All right, it is 12:01, so we will go ahead and get started. So wanted to welcome everyone to the Technology and Webinar Series. My name is Keith Cook. I'm the Industry Manager at Esri for Planning and Community Development. And I'm joined today by John Houseal and Jackie Berg from Houseal Lavigne. This is the Technology and Planning Webinar Series. It's a three-part series that we wanted to put together for you to really hit some highlights that we think are key issues facing planning departments today. We're going to be talking about zoning today. Next month, we'll be focusing on planning. And then in August, we'll be talking about the ins and outs of the digital twin. So for today's session, we're going to be talking specifically about how we can leverage GIS and zoning to address housing diversity, housing density, housing developments. And one of the things that in our discussions about this beforehand is that, you know, if you talk technology and planning departments, it varies greatly. That's probably an understatement, from planning department to planning department and consulting firm to consulting firm and how it's used. Some have it fully integrated into their workflows. Some are using GIS in a token manner. Some are just using it to print out some maps here and there. I think what we're going to show you in this series, and specifically today, is how GIS is an integral part of your zoning strategy and how you really don't need to be moving forward without it. My role at Esri in this role as industry manager for planning and community development is I get to work with planning departments from across the country, really kind of across the world, and I've yet to see any two that do things exactly the same. But in talking with them and learning about what they are dealing with, we've seen a lot of common projects and priorities that have come up. And specifically, if you look at the first three on the left, comprehensive plan updates, zoning reform, housing policy, if you put those in a Venn diagram, there would be a lot of overlap between those. And so we're seeing a still sort of a backlog in comp plan updates, master plans, general plans, as a result of the pandemic. So we're still seeing a lot of cities and counties scrambling to make those updates happen. We're also seeing, one of the things I'm really happy about is we're also seeing a big push towards improving public participation. We're seeing a lot of planning departments that are understanding the necessity of doing more than engaging the public Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Planning Commission meeting. And so we'll be talking about that during this series, but it's interesting where we're seeing planning departments that are striving for more of a partnership between the public and their department and what they're doing. And then we're also seeing a big push in the resilience planning side of things, which can mean different things to different organizations. So that can mean dealing with being resilient towards natural disasters, economic downturns, and so forth. But we're going to focus a great deal today on zoning reform. Now, GIS is an integral part of everything that you see here. There is no one that should be charging forward in any of these projects without GIS as a part of it. The good news for planners is that GIS is much more accessible now, and it's accessible through a series of web and mobile applications. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, some of the stuff we're going to show you today is desktop based, right? It's going to be ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS City Engine, but a lot of the applications that we'll be focusing on over this entire series are web-based. And the benefit here is that it means you don't have to necessarily be a GIS expert to be able to leverage these GIS tools. Planners can use their subject matter expertise to be able to leverage tools to be able to do things like scenario planning, public notifications, engaging with the public, collecting data in the field, and so forth. And so, you know, I tell planners this all the time. This will sound weird coming from someone from Esri. I don't actually have any Esri software on my machine. But the thing is I don't really need it. I'm not creating parcels. I'm not creating zoning data. I'm not doing future land use plans. I'm taking the data that other people create and analyzing it, making maps, and so forth. And that's what planners can do with these apps. So specifically within ArcGIS, we have a planning and community development toolbox. It's a series of applications. It's not a one app that does everything. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS City Engine a fair amount today, and those are desktop-based. But everything else you see here is web-based or mobile-based. So I mentioned being able to do scenario planning. That's where ArcGIS Urban comes in. So I can test out scenarios to be able to say, okay, if we were to revamp our zoning ordinance and allow greater housing density, what would that look like? How many people could we add? What would the tax revenue benefits be for us? If we were to add mixed use developments, what would that look like? How many jobs could we add? What would the impact be on traffic, on utilities, and so forth? That's what Urban allows you to be able to do. Business Analyst is really useful because it gives you insight into demographics and socioeconomic data. Story Maps is a wonderful tool for planners because every planner has a story to tell, whether it's the 8 items coming up on the Planning Commission meeting later in the month or the revamping of the comp plan. Story Maps provides that tool to be able to tell that story. And then all of this content can then be put into ArcGIS Hub, which again is really sort of the public engagement, the civic inclusion tool that allows the public to not only be educated about what's going on, but be able to provide feedback in terms of surveys or freehand comments or even drawing on a map and adding context there as well. So, and then finally, ArcGIS Insights is really useful. If you have a permitting system, it's a great way to be able to generate business intelligence from that and then be able to see patterns and trends that have been occurring over time. But it's not just software. We also have services that are tied into that. Esri, of course, has had professional services in place for a long time, but we rely a great deal on our Esri partner network, and especially on folks like Houseal Lavigne, because Esri does not run a planning practice. Houseal Lavigne does. I am so happy to say I will never have to write a zoning ordinance again or have to deal with a rezoning in a public hearing. That's why we have great partners in this space like Houseal Lavigne to be able to support that planning toolbox. So in the end, what we're doing is we're transforming how the planning department works. And again, we're doing this with ArcGIS being the cornerstone of that technology. So, things in a planning department don't always move in a linear nature. They're always very interconnected. So the civic inclusion part where we're, again, getting feedback from the public, we're letting them know about changes to the plans that are coming up. That impacts our current planning and our long range planning. That's where we can use Urban and ArcGIS solutions like the public notification app to take care of day-to-day operations and play out different scenarios. Again, we can use insights within our permitting system to generate more value from that system. We can empower our building and zoning code enforcement officers to go out into the field and collect data. And then we can use GIS as part of our policy development. So when we're working with city and county managers, with state leaders as well, we can take a data-driven approach to the policies that we think are best for our community to design a sustainable and a thriving community. It's no longer a good idea because Keith or John or Jackie says it's a good idea. It's a good idea because of these specific metrics, which we can show with GIS. One last thing I wanted to go over is there is funding available for the things that you're going to see today. So there is a grant from the YIMBY Grant Incentive Program that is in place. It is not active as of today. Last I checked, I'm bugging the heck out of HUD to find out when this is going active. It will go active this year. But this is basically a grant for cities and counties to apply for to help remove hurdles to increasing their housing supply and affordability. So this could be things like updating your zoning ordinance. It could be streamlining the requirements for permitting, the regulatory aspects of it, or just overall improving housing strategies. Now, when this comes out, Esri has an offer in place that will have the software and so forth that you would need. But folks like Houseal Lavigne will also have an offer in place to help you with the actual planning practice aspect of it. So we'll keep you up to speed on this as this happens. Hopefully this will be in place by our by our next seminar. We'll let you know about that. I wanted to provide my contact information here in case you have any questions. As always, please feel free to reach out to your account teams. I'm happy to help as well. We're here to help support you and make sure you're successful. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to John Houseal. He's the co-founder and partner at Houseal Lavigne. So John, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Keith. I'm in my office here in Chicago with Jackie, so I will try to share our screen and we'll get rocking and rolling. So, Keith, you see that okay? Good.
I do. You're good.
Okay, good. All right, so we're gonna get into this now. Um, uh, Again, real quickly, so thanks for joining us today for this webinar. Jackie Wells and I are going to be going through some experience that we've got from working with communities across the country and how we're really beginning to leverage different technology platforms into zoning to help with land use development, housing, and other issues, as Keith said, that communities are facing. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes, literally just a couple real quick to introduce who we are. Houseal Lavigne is a planning, zoning, design, and geospatial firm. We have offices in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Seattle. We work with more than 400 communities across the U.S. doing all manner of planning, zoning, and GIS related assignments. We've sort of had the experience of working with more than 30 states across the country, so different ways people do things change from state to state and region to region. And we're going to bring some of that to you today. And we try to approach everything in a very innovative approach. And Esri and certain technology platforms have been really important for us to begin to approach things a little bit differently as we're going to showcase today. I'm not going to go through all of our zoning experience, but just know and be comfortable in knowing we have a ton. This is some of the zoning work that we've done across the United States. And there's more, but this is just what we could pack it on one slide and make it readable. In addition to our zoning experience, a lot of our zoning experience is specifically tied to cities that are doing planning and zoning as sort of a 1-2 punch or in the same manner. And that really allows us to laser focus both planning and the zoning to get stuff done. The days of planning for the sake of planning are gone. Cities do planning and then zoning to get something done, to accomplish a task, to address an issue, to improve housing options, etc. And a lot of our experience across the country is literally that hand in hand, glove in hand sort of approach to planning and zoning. So again, we've written several different publications. The most recent one, you see a few on the screen. The most recent one that Jackie and I wrote was Zoning Practice, and it was February, just a few months ago. So take a look at that if you want to, but it's entirely around the notion of practicing gentle density as we all try to approach the housing crisis in the U.S. So that's a good zoning practice to take a look at. Now I think, Dan, you're going to throw a poll out there real quick for everybody. Dan?
Yes. Sorry, John. There's first one's up there now.
Okay.
Just a very simple question. Which best describes your community zoning code? Take a couple more seconds. We've got 62 responses that are coming in.
Right.
Okay. That's a good spread.
So
Just
again,
a few more seconds.
So according to the poll that we just put out there, it looks like about a third of you said your code is in need of an update. That's sort of the top answer. About 30% of you said you're in the process right now of updating your code. So hopefully we'll be able to show you some things you could possibly utilize on the projects that you're currently undertaking. Quarter of you said your code is in good shape. Congratulations. We run into some abominable code. So if you're working with a pretty good code, congratulations. So that's great. All right, so we're going to jump back into the presentation here. All right. Where? Hold on. There we go. Technical problems. So the first thing we want to do is identify some and minimizing regulatory barriers that many of you are probably facing. And they run the gamut to several different ones. So what's prohibiting desirable development that you might want to see in your communities? Much of it housing, maybe it's mixed use, maybe it's commercial, but you're not seeing it. So the first one, and these are sort of, I'm teeing up what we're going to be going over in the rest of the presentation. So the first one is zoning map and future land use and plan alignment. A lot of you are working on zoning ordinances, like you said, or soon will be, or recognize the need to be, but the policy needs to be established by your planning documents, your comprehensive plans, your downtown plans, a district or neighborhood plan, and then zoning is used to implement that. And one of the problems to regulatory barriers are if the planning and the zoning don't align. It's a real barrier to getting the regulations in place that you need. So you got to make sure your map and your land use plan align. So you're looking for residential zoning in areas designated for residential development, et cetera. And as we begin to do planning that is a lot more mixed use, a lot more integrated housing, zoning ordinances are more antiquated. They don't match that and don't align with new planning techniques. Overly restrictive dimensional standards, height, setback, lot coverage, FAR. These are all dimensional or bulk standards that can't be theoretical or conceptual if they don't work in a viable marketplace, if they don't work given the geographic constraints of a property within the context of a location, then it's going to yield a lack of development response and viability. So your dimensional standards have to be market driven, they have to be viable, and they have to work in the context of the property in the area you're talking about. And the other one are requirements like parking or open space requirements. There are still a lot of communities out there, maybe some of you on this call, that use parking as a density control. You don't need 2.5 parking spaces per unit, but a lot of communities still have standards like that in place, and it just limits the numbers of units you can have because you can't supply that amount of parking. So if parking is out of step, if open space is out of step, it will limit severely your development potential of a site. So one of the things we're going to get into right now, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie. She's going to go through some of those regulatory barriers and some of the ways we are using technology to address and overcome those regulatory barriers as we move sort of from planning into the zoning realm. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Wells.
Thanks so much, John. And before we get into this, we're going to throw one more poll question on the screen. So this one's trying to gauge your experience with GIS, the different GIS tools you use, just to help us know how to gauge our conversation here. So Dan?
Okay, I've added this one. This one is a multi-select tool, so please select all of the relevant tools that apply to you. Might need to give a little bit more time for responses since there's so many choices here.
So far, it looks like most folks are using Pro, ArcGIS Pro, and Online. A couple of people using City Engine and Urban, and some other Esri tools as well. But several folks also using other GIS products rather than Esri are looking to expand their GIS capabilities. All right, so going back to the presentation, now that we know everyone's comfort level with GIS, we'll get into land use plan and zoning map alignment. So ideally, your community will have recently adopted a new land use plan that reflects the vision of the community, and we need to, align the zoning map to ensure that type of development can occur. But what happens if your land use plan doesn't provide adequate direction? We've come across comprehensive plans where the different land use categories don't include descriptions, or the plans don't include a map at all. So if the plan doesn't include a map, you certainly want to go through that process with your community. But if the descriptions are lacking, you certainly want to get direction on what those various categories mean. So conduct community outreach, draft policy assumptions, and then bring those assumptions to your elected and appointed officials before you get started on the zoning and land use map alignment analysis. This will make sure that any zoning map changes aren't challenged because there is adequate policy direction established. So once we have adequate policy direction, step one of the land use plan and zoning map alignment is to develop a land use and zoning district crosswalk. So here on the screen, we have land use categories in the rows and then zoning districts in the columns. And we've ranked them 1, 2, or 3 based on the level of alignment between the land use category description and the zoning district purpose and intent statement and the various uses that are allowed and dimensional standards that are required. So once you have this crosswalk developed and you've vetted it with other staff, stakeholders, elected and appointed officials, you need to reorganize that matrix to start your initial GIS analysis. So the matrix needs to be simplified so that it can enrich your parcel data. So to enrich your parcel data, you'll have to be sure that you have parcel-based zoning information. So a lot of communities will have zoning layers that are large district-wide polygons. We want to make sure that the zoning data is at the parcel level as well. So after we've joined our zoning layer with our parcel layer, we can then join the crosswalk combinations to the parcel data to create a map of the crosswalk values, as you can see here. So step 3 will be assessing your amendment options. So some important questions to ask as you are looking at these various green, yellow, and red areas. Can alignment be achieved through text amendments only? Should districts be consolidated? And do new districts need to be developed? So after you think about and come up with a good direction for these questions, you'll develop your proposed zoning map. And in this process, it's very important that you balance achieving district alignment with how that may impact property rights. So we want to avoid downzoning whenever possible. We want to accommodate existing development and not create a unnecessary number of non-conforming uses or lots. And we also want to keep in mind the zoning map amendment approval process. So as we all know, the more public notices that have to be sent out, the more concerned or upset residents may become and the more contentious the approval process can be. So we want to make sure that we have that end process in mind as we're thinking about the zoning map. So after there is a kind of staff level map that's ready to be reviewed, we want to refine that with stakeholder input. So we have found that a web app is the best way to do this. So this allows multiple users to get into the map, draw their own polygons if they think district boundaries should be different, add comments, and learn more about, they can click on a parcel, see what the existing zoning is, what the future land use category designation is, to better inform their review. You can leave comments, so you can communicate with your fellow staff or the stakeholders who you were getting input from. So this really helps to refine the zoning map in a very efficient way. So our second strategy to addressing regulatory barriers is the nonconformities analysis. A nonconformities analysis will compare the minimum lot area and width standards in your zoning districts with existing development on the ground. This will help to identify whether your existing standards reflect the development that you have or if they're creating an unnecessary number of legal nonconformities. So this process will test new standards to see how we can lessen the number of nonconformities. But on the opposite side, we will also want to test new subdivision opportunities that may be created by lowering our lot area and width standards. So a lot of the pushback we often receive when presenting a nonconformities analysis and a proposed lower dimensional standards is the concern that will change the character of someone's neighborhood. So by testing for new opportunities for subdivision, you're ensuring that that character, the development pattern in an area won't be able to shift too much over time. Nonconformities analysis is important just to make it easier for people to invest in their lots and their buildings. And it will also allow people to more easily get mortgages and loans for home purchases and improvements. So a great way to encourage reinvestment and redevelopment of existing housing in your community. So the first step for our nonconformities analysis is to set up the street order table. So in this table, you're going to rank the types of street a property would face, or where that front edge should be. So in commercial districts, it's more likely that they'll be fronting on an arterial or a collector road, whereas a residential would more likely be on a local or more of a residentially scaled road. So after we have our street types ranked, we're able to run the parcel edge tool in Pro. So this will split the edges of the parcels into our front, side, and rear edges. And then of course we need to refine and QC these parcel edges, make sure that the tool has identified all of those parcels correctly, and that we haven't misidentified a street-facing side yard as a front yard, as that will likely skew our analysis. And so after we've confirmed that, we can calculate the front edge length or the lot width, and then publish that data to our online nonconformities analysis web app. So here is our web app where we can test the lot area and lot width standards through this dashboard here on the left-hand side of the screen. So we're able to type in new standards. So here we have a 15,000 square foot lot area that's being tested and a 75-foot lot width. And we are able to then update those standards to see how new standards would impact the development. So all of these red parcels, these are parcels that are non-conforming, so they are smaller in terms of lot area and width than what the zoning ordinance would require. And the green parcels are the existing subdivision opportunities. And apologies, I'm having a bit of a technical difficulty. The video here won't play, oh, there we go. So this will show you how we can reduce or test new standards, and this web app will automatically update, and we can see that the number of red parcels is decreasing, but the number of green parcels is increasing. So this tool really helps us balance the minimizing nonconformities while also minimizing new opportunities for subdivision. So after you have tested the lot area and lot width standards, we want to refine those recommendations with stakeholders, so bring those to the public for review. We would recommend bringing static recommendations to the public rather than the testing tool, as it's pretty easy to fall into a rabbit hole with that tool in public. But we like to present it through tables like this, where you have the existing and alternative lot areas and widths, and then the results of your analysis presented. Static maps are also a great way of illustrating the impacts of lowering standards in a certain district. So going from 9,000 square feet of lot area to 8,000 to 7,000, you can see really easily the number of red parcels has decreased quite significantly. All right, so our third way to address regulatory barriers is going to be presented by John, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, the first part that Jackie was going through really highlighted a lot of map analysis, from planning to zoning alignment and nonconformities analysis, primarily using a lot of ArcGIS Pro. We're going to be moving into examples that really highlight some ArcGIS Urban, some ArcGIS City Engine, and then a little bit of Unreal Gaming Engine. So we're going to go into sort of that direction to take a look at some of this right now. And we're really going to be analyzing with these other tools, development standards testing. So we did a lot of the nonconformities and alignment before. We're going to be beginning to look at development or more parcel specific sort of analysis from the zoning perspective, because ultimately, if you're a planner in a community, it's going to come down to what can be built on a site and how does that fit with the neighborhood and feedback. So we want to understand how regulations and requirements limit the development potential of a site. We want to help ask questions about what could go there. Is it appropriate? Is it not? What the impact would be? What you see here is a screenshot using ArcGIS Urban. You build a 3D model of the entire city. We then use Urban to identify, through some analysis that we run, what sites are most susceptible or viable for redevelopment and investment. And then by using applications on GIS Urban to figure out, should it be 4-story, 5-story, 12-story? What should the setbacks be? And we can run 3D analysis from zoning and land use across an entire city, drilling down to both citywide, district-wide, or down to the individual site. What you see here is an example of using City Engine, ArcGIS City Engine. And a lot of us know that you change the minimum unit size in a zoning district from 700 square feet per unit to 1,200 square feet per unit. You can't get as many units. If the density stays the same, what does the height have to be to meet the residential threshold you're trying to achieve on a site or in a neighborhood if you're trying to provide more residential opportunity or investment? What about setbacks, side and front yard? What about required parking? What about required courtyards, plazas, or public space? You begin to move one thing, the other thing changes. And it may very well be that if you look at height, setback, FAR, lot coverage, and parking, you could never get the development that you want to get. So by using these dashboards and running these examples and analysis in ArcGIS City Engine, we can test in real time. You could do this with staff or a public event. You could say, let's change the setback. Let's change the height. Let's change this lot coverage. Let's change the density and unit size. And this geometry, this bulk, this volumetric analysis of development potential on this site changes in real time with dashboard printouts. So you can see from this analysis, you can actually test the development potential and development standards that you're thinking about as a city to see if it would actually work on a particular site and or district. It's incredibly effective, and it allows you to respond to, say, audience input or a question from a council member or a neighborhood group that says, well, what if we change this? You could change that variable and standard and see what the resulting development would look like. Very powerful tool. And I know a few of you said at the beginning in the poll, it looks like a handful of you may be more familiar with City Engine than others in the process. The other one is how technology can really help streamline the approval process. Development and zoning approvals is tough in a community because everybody comes out of the woodwork to say they like something and more likely that they don't like something. So we want to begin to take a look at some of the things that really make it difficult to get through a streamlined approval process. So unclear or subjective design standards, there's no fair certainty as to what I can or cannot expect to see proposed in my neighborhood. One of the solutions is to make sure clear design standards exist. And if they don't exist before zoning, during the zoning process, you should try to get some of those design standards in place. California's done a good job in this last round of some of their requirements to move objective standards to subjective standards. So they're trying to get rid of these. A development could do this. Maybe we should consider this, to making it regulatory as shalls and shoulds, not coulds and woulds. And I think that's an important component, and they're sort of leading the way on that. Lack of adopted policy. It's really hard to write zoning if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. And the biggest mistake communities make that we see is they get into the weeds before they know what they're trying to accomplish. You'll hear arguments like, it should be a 12-foot setback. No, it should be a 20-foot setback. It should be a variable proportion-driven setback based on lot width. But nobody steps back to say, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to achieve by the right setback? What are we trying to achieve by the right mix of uses? What development should go here? That's policy. And it's hard to write regulations if policy is not clear. So if you're wading into zoning, and some of you said you already are, about a third of you, make sure you have policy direction. If the city officials say we want to achieve X, Y, and Z for this neighborhood, you have policy with which to direct your zoning efforts. If you don't know what the city is trying to achieve in a neighborhood, it's really hard to write regulations to deliver that because you don't know what you're delivering. So make sure you update your plans to get policy direction. The next one is requiring unnecessary referrals and meetings. Look at your processes to make sure they're streamlined and get rid of any unnecessary steps from staff review all the way up to public hearings and everything in between. Another one is a lack of public engagement. A kiss of death for a project that you may want to see approved or your city would want to be approved is if the city's or neighborhood's first glimpse of it is at a public hearing. They feel like, why didn't we know about this? It's too late in the process. This development seems like it's already 80% cooked. Like, why didn't we know about this earlier? So what we recommend is engaging neighborhoods much earlier on. When we write zoning ordinances and we change the procedures, One of the things we propose, and in most of our ordinances are successful at getting it in there, is that neighborhood engagement is required before an application is actually filed. So from concept all the way through to final public hearing, the neighborhood is informed as to what to do, what's going on, and developers can respond accordingly. And the last one is using technology to sort of get rid of the fear of unknown. The better we can visualize and demonstrate what new development will look like, the fear of the unknown goes away. And we have a few examples where this has been incredibly successful. And a big part of that is visualizing development. All the professionals on this phone can visualize plan view. We can visualize what a development would look like on a site. Most people cannot. So the better we can visualize what that impact will be, we get rid of the fear of the unknown because it's known then what will come out of the ground. So I want to go through a little bit of this. So this first one is using ArcGIS Urban and City Engine to visualize development potential. And what you see on here is as a client we had in California, we were working to identify sites for residential infill development because they needed to get their residential options up, their increased housing availability. So we used ArcGIS Urban to identify potential sites. Jackie went through that a little bit earlier. We then utilized City Engine to drill down onto the sites that Urban identified. And then we were able to come into here for these neighborhoods, and we were able to show the context of what's in this neighborhood is in white. It's all done in Urban and City Engine. And then the actual site, our goal here and our analysis in Urban said we could get about 280 residential units on this property. City didn't think we could, neighbor didn't think we could. And they said to get that many units, it would never fit the site. It would never be appropriate. They wanted to keep that little restaurant on the corner. And so we used City Engine coming in after Urban. We used City Engine to show what development on the site could look like. And then you could hit an exploded view of this, and you can see that as the layers separate, I'll try to run this again. So you can see here, it's got ground floor commercial, residential apartments above, decked parking behind the units, so you can't see it. This yielded about 280 units, and the neighbors and the city said, boy, this would actually be great here. It's not going to be too dense. It's a realistic development proposal. And what eliminated the fear from the city and the neighbors is the fact that we were able to visualize this in City Engine so anybody could go into this and play around with it and see what the impact would be if this was built. So it's a very, very powerful tool. The next example I want to give about sort of eliminating that fear is an example from a town outside of Chicago here. They have a historic downtown, really quite an impressive small little downtown. But any developer that proposed anything, the neighborhoods just went up in arms. They really didn't like it. The approval process was taking years and years. Developers after a while just threw their hands up and said, we're out. And it was really difficult because people couldn't imagine what would go there. So we worked with this town, and what we did is we built a 3D model of their entire historic downtown. And what you see here is the City Engine model. And then any developer who's looking to propose a development would give us their 3D files, and we would put it in City Engine into the model of their downtown. So any resident, any elected official could walk around or fly around in this downtown. Existing buildings were in white. Any proposed new development would be rendered in sort of a high fidelity model like you see here. And that way everybody could see exactly what this would look like. We built a map where you could click at any point in the map and it would take you there. Again, existing conditions in white. This is existing parking lot. What you're going to see here is a proposed development for that parking lot. And before this, it was a rendered board at an open house or an architectural elevation of the drawing. But by doing it this way, residents, elected officials, appointed officials could all know exactly what the development would look like. To scale, it was fantastic. Since they started doing this, the last several developments proposed have gone through the process pretty efficiently. They've been approved. And now this process is actually required in their zoning ordinance, where if a developer is proposing something in the downtown, the developer has to have their architects give us the 3D information. We then bring it into our City Engine model of the downtown, and then we post these scenes so anybody can go online without needing all the software like Keith talked about, and people could experience this prior to the public hearing. So they knew exactly what the development was going to be. It's worked extremely well. So these last two examples were examples of using ArcGIS Urban, then ArcGIS City Engine, and then this last one, make it a video game, was bringing it from ArcGIS or Arc City Engine all the way into then an Unreal gaming engine. So we've got one more poll here that Dan is going to throw up.
Okay, and this is just a very basic poll. Would you like to be contacted? Don't worry about entering your email because it'll get that based on your registration. So take a minute and let us know.
Okay, so it looks like about 40% of you close just on your would like some follow-up, and that's great to hear. So again, so just to sort of to wrap things up here, again, what we tried to show over the last few examples was everything from ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Urban, ArcGIS City Engine, Unreal Gaming Engine, and a combination of those with dashboards and other features to begin to apply technology to the base map analysis, existing conditions analysis, market testing, visualization, immersive environments, and then real-time dashboards to help really at every stage of development and in every stage of developing new zoning ordinances to achieve the residential or non-residential objectives your city is trying to face. So with that, I just want to say thanks so much. We've got the contact slides up here, information for both Keith, myself, and for Jackie. And so with this, at this point, Dan, I think I'll turn it over to you to sort of like facilitate any Q&A that we have. We've got about 15 minutes or so left.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got just a reminder, there's a Q&A button in Teams, so please use that to submit some questions. We have the first one coming in here. This would be for Jackie. What kind of app is used to test the non-conformities?
So that's an online dashboard that we create through ArcGIS Online. And we can follow up with some additional information, links about how to build your own dashboard online as well.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Next one. Are there any Esri learning modules you'd suggest for learning how to do a non-conformities or land use suitability analysis?
A specific module. I would have to look at that. I would love to tell you I can keep up with the hundreds of new training modules that we put out every year. That would be a lie. But that's something we can definitely look at, and I can find Jackie, unless there's one that you know that you used for this. That's something we can look up, and I'll be happy to get back to you. I'm sure there's someone on our education team yelling at the screen right now, telling me the name of this, and I don't know what it is, but we will find out for you.
I think, and that's the right answer. I think, and I'm probably the least tech person on this call, even though I've probably done more zoning than anybody else on the call. And I think the key thing here is to the extent possible, go to the online training that Esri offers to increase your literacy across all the different applications. What we've demonstrated here is solutions that we've constructed and processes that we put in place to deliver these solutions and analyses to our clients. But that doesn't mean somebody else could use the same thing in a slightly different way that would work best for their community. So Pro is so capable on a lot of the stuff, as is Urban, that you can query. We've looked at a number of different things that we didn't cover here, like not only non-conformity analysis, but an incompatibility analysis. Where do industrial zoning districts abut single-family residential districts? That's an analysis that can be run very easily using Pro. So there's a lot of different things when you get to use the software, understand the software, and you understand zoning, you understand planning, and you understand the different software capabilities. It's easy to step back and say, let's run this analysis. That's great, and it's exactly what we're looking for. That may be totally different than what we've showcased here. So probably not one or even two modules to look at, but coming up to speed on Pro and Urban are good starts.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Next one. How does a community decide whether to use form-based or Euclidean approach to zoning?
All right, I'm going to take a shot at this one because it's a zoning question, not just tech, but there's no one size fits all for zoning. Cities that say we want a form-based code for our entire city, we often, and I personally professionally would strongly recommend against that sort of blanket approach up front. As Jackie can attest, we've done them all over the country. It's often a combination of Euclidean zoning, form-based code, and incentive zoning, and a combination of those three. If you have a historic downtown, form-based code might work really well for a downtown, a historic downtown, where the form and the character is 100% set. Extrapolating form-based code approaches to an entire community, that form is established. That's pretty prescriptive. The other thing from a staff side from the city, you should know, form-based codes are often pretty cumbersome to administer. They're not a simple code to administer. They can be effective, but they're not as easy as Euclidean. So I would say it's not one or the other. It's analyzing your community. And one of the things we do up front is we do a form-based code sort of applicability assessment. Like we do an assessment of the community and say, we think form-based code is the best approach for this area. Or we'll say, we don't think form-based code is right. You should be using a Euclidean with a little bit of incentive zoning. So the first thing is to figure out the areas of your town, what type of zoning is the best. And ordinances nowadays, I would say 80% of them or more are a combination of the two. They should not be one or the other.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Yeah, a lot of good questions rolling in here. Next one. I do not have access to LiDAR or 3D data. Can I still use these tools?
I think the easy answer is yes. Esri has created a national coverage of 3D masses based on OpenStreetMap data. So that is available to everyone and is a tool that is available. Keith, do you want to go on that any more detail?
Yeah, so this is now part of the ArcGIS urban setup. If you don't have 3D buildings in place, you can use the OpenStreetMap 3D buildings that come with it. So it's a great way to get started. That honestly was one of the biggest hurdles that we had some people face when they were starting urban. They said, well, I don't have 3D building footprints. Well, that hurdle's gone now. So you can start up right away, and really all you need parcels, you need zoning. That's it. And then you can always add contextual data as you should, but all the 3D base map has been added. So,
but it wasn't that long ago. I'm sure a lot of you on the call know it wasn't that long ago that a lot of cities didn't have GIS available. They would get it from the counties. Some counties were good about giving it out. Some counties were not good about giving it out. The barrier of entry for this data now is almost zero. So much data is available to everyone. It's really remarkable, and it's been one of the biggest game changers for every community to be able to get access to the data that already exists. And then we can leverage the technology to manipulate that data to begin to run these assessments that we need to run, this analysis. It's been a game changer in just the last few years. And that needle is moving rapidly.
Yeah, no kidding.
And if you're having trouble accessing the data you think you need, reach out. And if it's available, we can figure out how to point you to how to get it if you don't know how to get it.
All right, thank you everybody for that one. Good team effort there. Okay, next one. How does the city start when it has nothing GIS related? Our mapping consists of PDF maps and a zoning map.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. I didn't laugh.
I think we worked in your town. We work in a lot of towns like that. It's not unusual. That's why I said what began to move the needle, and Keith chimed in, you know this better than I do, but a few years ago, or more than a few years ago now, probably about 15 years ago, is counties became the ones who were sort of the holders, the gatekeepers of GIS. They then had intergovernmental agreements with municipalities to provide GIS data to the cities within the county. That's changed now, but that's what got GIS information out pretty effectively 15, 20 years ago or so. But Keith, if you get any input on sort of getting someone started from where they have nothing to where they've got some decent fundamental GIS information.
Yeah, I still have PTSD about data acquisition from back in the day. So
Yeah.
no, that's correct in that a lot of times the city wouldn't be the ones responsible for collecting a lot of the base map data, particularly parcels and so forth. That would be done at the county level. I have stories when I worked at the town of Apex, North Carolina. Once a month, I drove up to Raleigh to get the CD from Wake County of the updated parcels for the county, and came back just gleeful that I had that, and get that loaded into the system. Today, data is so pervasive. Authoritative data, I should say, is really pervasive. So getting started is not the hurdle that it used to be. I think just making sure to understand where that data is, who is maintaining it, that's key, right? Are they the right people to maintain it? It's particularly important when you get to addressing and fun stuff like that. But that's really, much like 3D data, that's really not the hurdle. If I started tomorrow as a GIS manager at a city that said, we don't have anything, I feel almost certain I could have up and running a base map and web-based maps within an hour.
Yeah.
To be able to have those available to people to be able to view. That's how far we've come.
If you're one of the ones on the call who has questions about this, feel free to reach out to one of our contacts. Any one of us here, either Keith or Jackie or myself or our team here, could help you get going on that end. Like I said, the barrier of entry is almost eliminated. But again, I'm sure some of the people on the call, I can see, I recognize some of the names are calling in from or joining in from some pretty major metropolitan areas, but also little towns in fairly unpopulated areas in the middle of states that are not very populated. So we're dealing with a wide array of customers and communities. But if you need more help, reach out to one of us and we can help get you set up.
Please don't feel you have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
I'll also mention that the Esri marketplace has a lot of data that you can purchase, specifically parcel data. You would need to enrich it with attributes like your zoning, and that is something that we can help out with as well. That can be a really great starting point.
All right, thanks everybody. So we're getting close to top of the hour here, ending time. We've got time for a couple more questions, but just wanted to say that a lot of people were asking about slides and recordings. Those will be available. We will send everybody a link with the recording and the slides, so no worries there. And just a quick reminder that this is the first part in our 3-part series, so there will be 2 more parts, 2 more webinars coming up, one in July and one in August. So be sure to register for those. We'll put that link up here at the end. And then, okay. So finally, last question here. How long does it take to put together one of these virtual visualizations and to get from City Engine to Unreal? And I have a follow-up to that too.
Really varies on the quality of the data that your community has, the scale of the project that you're pursuing. If you have really good data, we can move very quickly, about 1 month or less. And that would be, of course, depending on the scale of the project. But otherwise, it would kind of depend on the quality of the data that you have and how much data prep we would need to do.
Yeah, we can move pretty quickly, and we've had clients give us some pretty seemingly unreal timelines to see if we could do something, and we've done it. But to Jackie's point, it's like people said, like, what's the cost of doing this? Well, it depends. Are you looking at one site? Are you looking at a downtown? Or are you looking at doing it for an entire city? We've done all those scales and more. And so reach out to one of us, reach out to me or Jackie. We've got teams of people here at Houseal Lavigne that do nothing but this sort of city engine and Unreal gaming engine and things. We're doing it for clients all over the US and overseas. It's really remarkably effective tool for so many different things. But the timeline and the cost and the involvement literally changes from study to study based on data and the geography and complexity of the area that we're talking about. We can do it to really, really high fidelity, like video game, movie quality, all the way down to just sort of basic geometry to study shadow or volumetrics or zoning. So there's also what's the level of fidelity that you are expecting for your project, and it can vary. So we've done the full range of that. So follow up to me or Jackie, and we can maybe jump on the call with you and sort of walk you through what we're talking about.
I would say, just to follow up real quickly on what you were talking about, John, I think in the scenario you showed, like for the city of Cypress, where urban can be used. So in that scenario, I think ideally what you would see is I can use urban to create 4, 5, 6, 7 different scenarios. Then based on, the feedback that we get and what's the most viable, I can then take 1 or 2 of those and then put them into City Engine. So not necessarily, everything doesn't necessarily have to go into a final, video game product. I can use Urban to come up with those multiple scenarios and then have administrators and leadership and stakeholders go, I like that, I don't like that, let's see what that looks like, and then build from there.
Yeah, that's a real good example to bring it back to the different software, like citywide 3D initial assessment and analysis, urban, perfect for that. City Engine is a higher level of detail where you can sort of like, and that's different. And then if you want to bring it into an animation or a video game, a fully immersive experience, then that would be the Unreal Gaming Engine. So depending on, again, what you're trying to accomplish with your models and the scale of your model, any one of those 3, urban, City Engine, and if you want to bring it into gaming, Unreal, different ones are the better suited for different types of projects. And once we explore your project, we can point you in the right direction as to what the best software is.
Excellent. Thank you all. One brief follow-up with that is if we could just elaborate on the types of data people should be asking for in order to create these 3D visualizations.
It really depends on how rich of a 3D you want, just like John was saying with the fidelity. So if you have massing and footprints and height attribute, you can kind of manually, create the massing from there. But in our digital twin webinar towards the end of the summer, we'll be going into much more detail on what that data is, how you can enrich it, and how you can use it to get these digital twins of your community.
So perfect segue. So I know we literally have like a minute left. Dan, if you could put up the information on the other seminars. You mentioned there are webinars. You mentioned it's a 3-part series. This is the first about zoning and technology. There are 2 more. And if you could mention what the other 2 are, then I think a lot of people on this call, and we've had a few questions here now on sort of digital twins. And that's where City Engine and Unreal and those would be even more applicable. But if we could put up there what the other 2 webinars are and when they are in the series, it would be a deeper dive into some of the questions you all are asking right now.
Keith, would you please share your intro slide with all that info?
Yes, I will. In fact, I had just pulled up the website so we can just kind of see. Here are the next one. So we'll be discussing planning on July 20th. And then we'll be going into digital twins on August 17th, taking a deeper dive into that as well. And so you can sign up for all of these on that same webinar series webpage.
Right.
And then I believe we'll also have the recording on this as well. So
correct. And again, the impetus behind this is we know, and a lot of you are working in planning offices or for cities or other organizations, in your organization, there are people that are better at certain aspects of these things. There are some people that just, they get the GIS side, they get the technology side. Other people might not get the tech, but they really have an eye for visualization and graphics. And other people are about policies and zoning, but they don't understand the tech side. And what we're trying to unveil here and demonstrate is that the barrier of entry to utilizing and leveraging this technology to do planning and zoning and visualization better exists. It's not this crazy technology barrier because it's not as complicated as it ever used to be. And regardless of what your literacy is in technology, the more important thing to us is your appetite and willingness to explore it as a tool. And if you have a desire to explore it as a tool, we want to make sure you know what it is, how to access it, and how to leverage it, no matter what it is you're trying to accomplish. What city or community you work for, these things exist and they're really powerful. And I think when people see what they can do, they're like, wow, that's exactly what we're looking for. It's attainable. And so We know there are some people on this call that are really tech-minded. We know there are a lot of people that absolutely are not. So if you want to get more into the tech, reach out. We can go into the weeds to the point where it would make most people's eyes glaze over. And if you want to avoid a little bit of the tech to get more about the approach and the planning and zoning side, we have professionals on board that do that as well. So we're just trying to underscore how valuable and effective these tools are to the profession of planning. It's been great for us, and we know it can really help out almost everybody on this call. So, and with that, thanks so much. Dan, I don't know if you want any other last words, but thanks for giving us about an hour of your day today. For all of you AICP planners, make sure you claim your 1 CM credit. Get those where you can, folks. And we would love to see you again at our other 2 webinars coming up in the next couple of months. And let anybody else know who may be interested, send the information to them as well. So it's been great to have you, and thanks so much for jumping on board. Keith, thanks so much for everything you guys do with us as a partner. You're fantastic.
Oh, thanks. This was fun for me. I enjoyed it.
And Jackie, thanks again. And Dan, thanks again as well.
Take care.
Thanks,
All right, take care,
everybody.
everybody.